Welcome back, Professor Sharma. This is our third episode of our conversation discussing Indology, Indic studies, Indian civilization, and how it has been mediated and absorbed by outsiders. So over to you, and let's continue our discussion.
Well, yes. Well, okay.
Yes.
So I should just like to make two comments
Sure.
as we proceed.
Sure.
The first is, as we were discussing earlier, the fact that outside observers have written about Indian or Indic civilization is not unique to it. What is unique is that its self-perception in modern times has been mediated by another civilization.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And the second comment is that to be more specific about what we are doing, we are using Professor Basham's famous work. I think it's well known enough to be called famous.
Yes.
The Wonder That Was India. And we began a systematic investigation of it.
Yes.
Last time.
Right.
Or yeah. So we can keep moving in that direction.
Sure. Yes. The Wonder That Was India by Professor L. Basham.
Next, we are still on chapter 1.
Yes.
And what we are discussing now is what he has to say about the discovery of ancient India.
Okay.
And especially how European scholarship discovered it.
Yeah.
Reminds us, of course, of Pandit Nehru's discovery of India.
Yes, yes.
But this is a discovery of ancient India.
Right.
Now, he makes a very interesting comment in the course of writing about this discovery. He says that Indian civilization is a culture which indeed, well, let me read the whole para.
Sure, yeah.
On the other hand, let me read the even larger segment from the para. Until the advent of the archaeologist, the peasant of Egypt or Iraq had no knowledge of the culture of his forefathers. And it is doubtful whether his Greek counterpart had any but the vaguest ideas about the glory of Periclean Athens. In each case, there had been an almost complete break with the past. And this is good because he goes on to say later on that India and China have, in fact, the oldest continuous cultural traditions in the world. But to come back to our quotation, on the other hand, the earliest Europeans to visit India found a culture fully conscious of its antiquity. A culture which indeed exaggerated that antiquity and claimed not to have fundamentally changed for many thousands of years. End of quote. What I want to take up for further inquiry is his remark about this exaggeration of antiquity.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Now, not here, not in this book, but in another book, he quotes an Indian scholar, very famous Indian scholar, R.G. Bhandarkar.
Oh, yeah, of course.
As confirming this point, that Indians tend to exaggerate India's or the Indian culture's antiquity. So that Professor Basham is arguing that not merely the culture exaggerated its antiquity, but the students, the Indian students of that culture also, played the same game.
Okay.
And to support himself, or maybe to guard himself against the charge that he's an outsider, criticizing Indian scholars, he quotes an Indian scholar.
Right.
in support of this.
Okay.
What he does not cite is,
Mm-hmm.
what he does not cite is his full statement in this
Oh.
other reference.
Oh, wow.
He says that Indian scholars have tried to exaggerate the antiquity of certain texts or cultural items,
Mm-hmm.
and Western scholars have done the opposite.
Mm.
They have gone to their other extreme
Uh-huh.
of denying its antiquity when there is good evidence
Oh, yeah.
for that antiquity.
Right. Right.
So he selects only one part of the statement,
Ah, okay.
supports his view.
Okay.
You
Okay.
can say that Western scholars tend to deny
Right. Right.
antiquity, being
Right.
modernist in their approach.
Right.
The Indian scholars tend to exaggerate antiquity,
Uh-huh.
being traditional or antiquarian in their approach.
Okay. Yeah.
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 This
Yeah.
is what Professor Bhandakar said.
Mm. Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other point in this regard we have to take in mind is that until the Harappan culture was really discovered,
Mm.
even giving that kind of a date
Oh, yeah.
by Indian scholars to anything would be
Right.
considered an exaggeration
Yes.
until it was discovered.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So this is a live issue.
Right.
This
Very much so. Yes.
tendency to pull in different directions, okay,
Right. Mm-hmm.
without claiming that either side is, right or wrong. Yeah,
Right.
we have to be guided by evidence in that.
Correct.
Yeah, but there is definitely a tendency of that kind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, next, he
Uh-huh.
refers to the Jesuits. He mentions Father Hanks-Leyden and Father Cordeau,
Mm-hmm.
who in the 17th century,
Mm-hmm.
soon after that, were already making a connection between the kinship of Sanskrit
Mm-hmm.
with the languages of Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Is a very interesting point.
Yes.
What he does not mention is that the same Jesuits were also responsible for a forgery called Azor Vedam.
Your camera disappeared for some reason. Your video? Okay, you're back. Yeah. Oh. Okay, you're back. Why?
No,
I don't
sorry
know.
about that.
Okay. Yeah, you're back. Okay, let's continue.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he mentions
Mm-hmm.
positive point about the Jesuits,
Right.
but not a negative point.
Ah.
They are also responsible for a forgery,
Oh gosh. Oh.
Azor Vedam,
Uh-huh.
on which Voltaire based some of his remarks.
Oh. Oh.
But it has now been established to have been a forgery.
Oh, wow.
So this other, and it's significant what the forgery was about.
Mm-hmm.
The Azor here is really Jesus.
Mm. Oh.
So they were trying to show or create a text
Uh-huh.
which gave Vedic recognition
Oh.
to the gospel.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
have to look at both sides,
Right. Right.
yeah, in
Yeah.
assessing their work.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Next, he mentions Sir William Jones
Mm-hmm.
and his great contribution
Mm-hmm.
To analyzing the connection between, or first making
Mm.
more clearly than his predecessors,
Okay.
and then emphasizing
Right. The connection between Sanskrit and Greek
and the European language.
European language.
He does not mention
Mm-hmm.
that Sir William Jones also believed that the universe was created in 4004 BC.
So sounds so funny.
with the result
Mm,
that Sir William Jones maintained
mhm,
that Krishna was a historical figure,
mhm,
but Ram was not.
mm,
Because the Indian tradition
mhm.
assigned Krishna to around 3100
BC.
BC.
Right. Yeah.
But Ram went beyond that.
So it won't fit in their timeline. Okay. Right, right. So the Krishna was okay, but not Ram.
Not Ram, because it was beyond 4004 BC.
Right.
His date was
Yeah.
anterior to
Right.
the creation of the world, according to the Christian view at the time. Yeah.
Mhm,
And coming to the question of the insight,
mhm,
uh, which connected Sanskrit with the European languages, Professor Basham makes a very useful point
mhm,
that one of the things Sir William Jones did was to reject the orthodox view of the 18th century
mm,
that all the languages were derived from Hebrew.
mm. Okay, at least that was corrected. Yeah.
So he
Mhm.
replaced that view, and which is to his credit, as you know, we
Right.
all agree.
Right.
Then he adds, in
Mhm,
place of this dogma, Jones suggested that Persian and the European languages were derived from a common ancestor which was not Hebrew. I would like to offer some remarks on the point about the common ancestor.
mm,
So, whereas he has moved away
mhm.
from the earlier orthodoxy
Right. Right.
that Hebrew was the origin of all languages,
Right.
and that all the languages, or that cluster of languages at least,
Uh,
had a common ancestor,
uh-huh.
there are two propositions.
Right.
They had a
Yeah.
common ancestor,
Right.
and that it was not Hebrew. He
Mm.
retains the view that they had a common ancestor, maintains that it is not Hebrew,
But the,
but they have a common ancestor.
right.
But this is not immediately obvious. Many
Uh-huh.
linguists have pointed out that
Uh-huh.
languages which exist side by side
Right.
develop similar characteristics
Uh-huh.
even when they don't have the same origin.
Okay. But he is saying that they had same
He
origin.
presumes a common ancestor.
Right. Right.
And although this is the regnant view,
Uh-huh.
there is some challenge to it
Mm-hmm.
from linguists,
Mm-hmm.
especially on the basis of the evidence of the indigenous languages of Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to keep an open mind on this point.
Right. So languages are part of the same separate family of languages. Separate, right? Australian.
Sorry, I didn't get your point.
Australian indigenous languages are totally separate family,
No,
are they?
no, from these, but among themselves,
Uh-huh.
whether we have to assume that the Australian Aboriginal languages, which
Uh-huh.
are in some ways similar, or
Uh-huh.
maybe in many ways similar,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
all arose from one language
Uh,
or coexisted as different languages
uh,
which have developed similar characteristics
right.
because of interaction.
Because of the proximity or whatever. Yeah. Right.
We have to keep this option in mind.
Right. Right.
I'm not saying that James Jones is wrong.
Right. Right.
Jones is wrong. I'm
Yeah.
just saying that we have to keep this option in mind.
I think the dominant view today, I think, is that there was something called Proto-Indo-European language.
Yeah.
And there, one family developed Indo-European languages, right, and then Indo-Persian, right, and so all those
There is
developed.
proto, as I understand it.
Right.
This is not my field, but as I understand it, you have a Proto-Indo-European,
Right.
PIE,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
from it, all the languages we now associate
Right.
with the Indo-European
Right.
family,
Right. Right.
they
Exactly.
arose from this.
Exactly. Right. Somewhere in Central Asia. Yes.
But it does assumes a common ancestor.
Right. Exactly. That's the dominant view anyway. Yeah.
But we have to always be alive to the fact
Right.
that this is an assumption.
It's an assumption, and yeah, there is no evidence, not
Yeah.
much solid evidence anyway. But the dominant view, yeah. With the likes of Prof.
We will revert to this point later also.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Then he mentions two other people,
Mhm.
well-known Western Indologists, Henry Colebrook and
Mhm.
Horace Amon Wilson.
Mm.
What he probably did not even know, but certainly does not mention. When I say he did not know, meaning not because he was ignorant, but because it's not a very widely known fact.
Mhm.
But it was highlighted by Professor Ingalls, Daniel H. Ingalls,
Okay.
in a note in the Journal of the American Oriental Society,
Mhm.
if memory serves.
Mhm.
But the point is important,
Mhm.
that he was shocked by the racism of his colleagues.
Mm. Mhm.
Wilson was shocked by the racism of his colleagues.
Mhm.
People don't mention these facts
Mhm.
or observations by people in our,
Yeah.
modern age, tolerant modern age.
Yeah. Right.
But even Ram Mohan Roy
Mhm.
had was insulted by a British, what we would now call magistrate or collector,
Mhm.
for not saluting him.
Wow.
When he was passing by him, a
Mm.
closed carriage,
Mm. Yeah.
even though he was passing by in a
Right.
closed carriage.
Mm.
So, but we have to be alive to these
Yeah.
dimensions of the situation.
Right.
Of course, not attaching, not
Mm.
attributing everything to it without evidence.
Yeah. Mm.
Next, he mentions the establishment of a chair in England
Okay.
called the Borden Professorship,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
very famous, right?
Right.
At Oxford,
At Oxford, yes.
first filled in 1832.
Mm.
What he does not mention, this is important,
Mm.
is that it was set up,
Mm-hmm.
quote, in Colonel Borden's own words, to enable his countrymen
Mm.
to proceed in the conversion of the natives of India
Oh wow.
to Christian religion.
Wow. Even an Oxford chair.
1832,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
very
That
few
was the goal.
Western scholars mention this,
Oh, okay. That was the goal. Oh, okay.
that it was set up for this purpose.
Borden Chair in Oxford.
And uh, in the second half of the 19th century,
Mm-hmm.
there were two contenders for the post,
Mm-hmm.
Max Muller and Morier Williams.
Mm.
And the chair went to Morier Williams
Mm-hmm.
because he argued
Mm-hmm.
that he was the right person
Mm.
to carry out the intentions of the chair's founder.
Mm.
Morier Williams had argued forcefully,
Mm-hmm.
I'm quoting Professor Peter van der Veer.
Mm.
Morier Williams had argued forcefully that he had the right Christian credentials for the missionary purposes of the chair.
Wow.
And his arguments carried the day.
Ah. And so he got the chair.
It is not as if it was dead letter
Ah.
that he had mentioned it, but nobody cared.
So the open fact, open secret kind of. Yeah.
So this goes unmentioned. I think this is a bit serious.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Then he mentions Franz Bopp, who's supposed to be the founder of Indo-European studies, modern Indo-European studies, and his reconstruction of the common ancestor of Sanskrit and the classical languages of Europe. Right? Now, what is amazing about this reconstruction is, and attention to this, my attention to this was especially drawn by Professor Lokesh Chandra. I had wondered about it myself, but then I was discussing it with him, he pointed out that there are no actual speakers of Indo-European. That Indo-European.
Right. It's a mythical term. Right.
Can you have a language without speakers?
Totally reconstructed term, yeah.
This fictitious. I would hesitate to call it fictitious because of the association of the word. It's totally fictive.
Yeah.
Yet it is treated as if it is real.
Yeah.
And I wonder, linguists would be able to shed more light on this. Why is it that Western scholars, by and large, linguists, always are keen to prove that Sanskrit is not the most ancient of the Indo-European language? Now, I want to know whether this is based on genuine linguistic analysis, or is there some underlying bias that if Sanskrit gets stated in that position, then it's kind of almost a cultural setback for the West.
Yeah.
That their languages are derived from those of India.
Yeah.
I would like to know whether this has played any role.
Right.
So in this sense, I regret my own lack of expertise in historical linguistics. But somebody should take this up, See, well, the reason why I'm concerned with this is this. It is very easy to go wrong in these matters. Suppose 2,000 years from now, when English has become virtually a global language, which almost it is.
It almost is, yeah.
Somebody is trying to trace the origins of English. And somehow we have forgotten the history of it. So what will you see? Spoken in America, spoken in England, spoken in India, parts of Asia, Hong Kong. And if you believe that there were original speakers of this language who came from some part of the world,
right,
which country would he settle on? Which part of the globe would seem most logical, quote unquote? America. Or from it goes to the east, goes to the west. After all, what are a few centuries? 4 or 5 centuries in this time span.
Right. Yeah, it becomes center shifted to America. Yeah.
And if on the basis of this, he tried to produce a proto-English. How much would that proto-English resemble British English? You see how it is so easy.
Yeah.
When it's being logical about things which might be historical, when the explanation is historical.
Right, right.
We can easily lose sight of the fact that it all arose from this one island.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So it's not such a open and shut case as I make it out. But then I have to, say it almost sotto voce that I have some doubt about this, which I don't know whether it is right or wrong. I should be entertained or how far it goes. It should be investigated.
Yes.
And it would also turn out to be just a whim of an ignorant person. Who knows?
Could be. But I've heard that the language of Lithuania is the closest to Sanskrit today. I don't know. I don't know the training.
Actually, it's not just our problem, it's our national problem.
Yeah.
We don't have
Yes.
serious, we don't have any more, I'm told,
Yeah.
serious historical linguists.
We don't have. Yeah.
So the whole field has been ceded, as it were, to Western scholarship.
Yes.
Or outsourced might be a better word.
Yeah.
But these are matters so close to our culture
Right.
that we should also have our own scholars looking at it.
Right. Yes.
Then he mentions the name of Lord Curzon and records the establishment of the Archaeological Survey under his viceroyalty. Right? What is worth mentioning is that there was a hymn to be sung at the Great Darbar for Queen Victoria, which Lord Curzon had set up. That hymn contained a verse which referred to the fleeting nature of empires. So he had that removed.
Oh, wow.
Because if you refer to the fleeting nature of empires, you imply that the British Empire could also.
Yeah. So, okay.
This is the extent of what some have called the illusion of permanence, to which the British had fallen victim by this time. With good reason, because no challenge to the British Empire was in sight.
Yeah.
Only human, maybe we would have had this, same psychology in a situation. Yeah.
Right.
Now, then Professor Basham mentioned the name of Sir John Marshall and the discovery of Harappan culture.
Yes.
And there he makes a comment which now, in our own times, seems a bit premature. Because he says, an Indian officer of the Archaeological Survey, R.D. Banerjee, and it is nice to see the Indian
contribution
officer being recognized for what he did, found seals at Mohenjo-daro in Sindh and recognized that they were the remains of a pre-Aryan civilization.
It has to come. That
It's a total assumption. It's quite clear now that it's an assumption.
Yeah.
But it's mentioned here as a fact.
Yeah. Many Western scholars still make that assumption.
Yeah. Well, I know we don't know.
Yeah.
But at least we should be we should be cautious.
Yeah.
Enough to recognize that at the moment we can't make such a definitive statement unless one is personally convinced.
Yeah.
But even then, one has to take the state of the art in mind.
Right. Yes. You no longer can assume Aryan invasion.
Yeah, and I think we should also stay out of, we should stay away from the controversy that this is a Western position, this is an Indian position. Because there are Indians who support the Western position and Western scholars who support the Indian position, not just now, but fairly ancient times. Ancient, relatively earlier time.
Right. It's still a dispute, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a. I mean, usually believed to be kind of, usually held to be pre-Aryan kind of thing,
Right.
would enable us to carry on the narrative.
Right. Yeah.
Because we need some consensus to have anything written.
Yeah.
So the narrative could continue,
Right.
but with some caution.
Right.
And Professor Basham is quite sensitive to this.
Oh, okay.
Somewhere he writes that the identification of the seal of the meditating yogi, surrounded by the animals,
Right.
may have been overconfidently identified with Shiva.
Pashupatinath kind of.
Yeah.
Right.
So he is sensitive to this dimension of our scholarship.
Oh, good. Okay.
Now then we come to the critical edition of the Mahabharata. He introduces that by saying that is Professor Basham. Now the chief initiative in Indology comes from the Indians themselves. Indians are well on the way to completing the first critical edition of the gigantic Mahabharata.
Yes.
Now, we need to discuss a point of general interest here on this point. To scholars who are interested in historical analysis and who inherit the Western commitment to the documentary hypothesis that a text may be made up of several strands. Yeah. And through historical analysis and linguistic analysis, we can identify different layers of it, so on. That is fine. But there are 2 points to be kept in mind from an Indic point of view. One is more directly related to the point I just made, and the second one is more general. Even in the Indic tradition, it is stated that Vyas had more than one disciple to whom the Mahabharata was transmitted. It is not the Indic tradition that there is only one recension of the Mahabharata, which you can restore.
Oh, okay. Right.
By the kind of analysis represented by the work being done at Pune. Done at Pune.
Bori.
By Professor Suktankar, yeah.
Yes.
So we should keep this in mind. This is not our tradition. This is a Western assumption.
That has to be one scripture, so to speak.
That is that one Mahabharata. Well, we have one scripture in the Veda, another. That is one Mahabharata. Names of others are mentioned, like Pal. Champagne is the one version we have got now.
Right.
And they may be within the rights to argue that we are trying to locate the original text of the Vaishampayan version.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
But there were others also. 4 or 5 of them. So this is a point we need to keep in mind. Second is this whole idea that you get down to the original text is somewhat at variance with the mainstream idea. We have to rehearse the fact that Hinduism is a plural tradition,
Mm.
You will find many other points of view also.
Yeah. Yeah.
The main tendency which
Mm.
we will notice that the text expands with time,
Yes.
and that is considered a perfectly legitimate development.
Yes. 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 Of course.
So it can be argued that within the Mahabharata itself, and I think Professor Klaus Klostermaier does specifically that
Mm-hmm.
in his survey of Hinduism, points out
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that there is one version of it being communicated by to his disciples,
Mm-hmm.
to the Vyasas,
Yes.
and then it is being recited at the sacrifice of
Mm.
now who was the king?
Are you referring to Parikshit and Janmejaya?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At the Janmejaya.
Janmejaya is right.
Right.
Right. Son
And
of
then and then we have the third recitation in the Nimisharanya.
Ah. Okay. Okay. So that's a totally separate.
There are three sections.
Ah. Right.
Sauti
Uh-huh.
is supposed to have heard it at that sacrifice.
Okay.
And so he is implored by the sages to share it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I'm still unsure about the exact right word to use here, Nimisharanya or Namisharanya. We'll have to check that.
Okay.
Yeah. But there is a clear recognition
Right.
that there were three recitations.
Of the Mahabharata. Yeah.
So then
Mm-hmm.
the Western academic response and the response of those Indian scholars who buy into the Western academic response was to create a critical edition.
So-called critical edition. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
What would have been the Indic response? What would be, or even should be, our response? I mean, we are both Indic and Western, you and I.
Yeah.
The Indic part of us, right?
The perspective we can
response. We should now be coming up with another recension, bringing Mahabharata up to date,
right,
making it up to date,
right
up to our own times.
Right.
It's a cultural history of India.
Yeah.
It's the Indic cultural history of India.
Yes. Itihasa, yes. Right.
And the independence of the country would be a fantastic, would have been or could still be
right
in India.
Right. Yeah, we should always specify it's a Vaishampayan version of Mahabharata that we're talking about. It's critical edition. Yeah.
We have Vasham.
Right.
I'm trying to recall the first person to whom Vyas narrated it. But in any case, Vaishampayan comes up.
Okay.
And so we can say very broadly, Vyas to Vaishampayan, Vaishampayan to Sauti, and Sauti to the sages.
Right. And Ganesha is the scribe who is writing.
The point I'm trying to make is that Western Indology has led to a certain loss of imagination.
Yes.
Or our obsession with Western Indology has led to a loss of cultural imagination on our part.
Yes.
As to what we should be doing in the natural course of our cultural evolution.
Do you think that this plurality of the text has worked better in the case of the Ramayana? Ramayana has, I think, many different versions and that are, I think, well accepted instead of one critical edition of Valmiki Ramayana, or is the same problem there also?
Again, I don't know I'm not a historical
Yeah.
linguist and not even a textual scholar in this sense.
Right.
But I might want to make a more general point about this, that in contrast to the Vedas, the fact that we have this
Right.
openness,
Openness, multiplicity, fluidity.
both the Mahabharata and the Ramayana
Right.
suggests
Many versions.
that they should be looked upon as our cultural idiom, in which we phrase our dilemmas
Yeah.
and deal with them.
Right. Moral dilemmas and
Exactly.
Yeah. Ethical dilemmas. Yeah.
Ethical dilemmas.
Right.
They are our idiom.
Yes. Right.
And therefore,
Yeah.
if one wants to convey a message of a particular kind,
Right.
he or she uses the idiom.
Right.
I believe there is a Chandravati Ramayana in Bengal, which gives Sita's point of view.
Sitayana, yeah. There are some versions called Sitayana, right? Sitayana, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
at least, at least we know that there are different authors for Ramayans. Like Tulsidas is almost equally celebrated like Valmiki, or Kamban in Tamil Nadu is celebrated for Ramayana. In Mahabharata's case, however, we have only one Vedas.
Oh no, we have a Telugu version.
In different, okay.
Yeah, Era Pragada was the last one of them. There were three. Okay. Nanne, I forget the name of all the three of them. Okay. So it took 3 generations to translate the.
Oh, wow.
There is a Sarala Mahabharata in Oriya, which has material not found in any other Mahabharata text.
Oh, wow. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So we do have multiple versions, and
yes, and what it tells us is that this became our idiom.
Yeah.
In which we discuss these issues.
Yes. Right.
Therefore, people wrote a text too. I'm told, for instance, in the Bengali version of the Ramayana, Kritivas, I believe, might be the. Well, I don't want to commit errors on live TV video, but I'm told that in the Bengali version, one of the major figures in opposition to Ram, Ravan or somebody else, is not killed, but put in deep sleep.
Okay.
Because killing them would be uchit na hoy. It would not be proper to kill such a major figure.
Okay. Yeah, there are these different versions of different.
Okay, anyway, but to revert to our task on hand. So, with the remark that we should also be sensitive to the Indic ways of dealing with our own texts. We should have a new Mahabharata.
Yes.
Now, there is one very interesting point that in the discovery of ancient India, even indirectly or in passing, Professor Basham does not mention the name of James Mill.
Yeah.
And that should be all right in the sense that he did not make any contribution the way the scholars mentioned book have.
Yeah.
His book has played a key role in the evolution of Indian historiography. Because I'm told that the division of Indian history into Hindu, Islamic, or Muslim, and Christian, and British, more or less on religious lines, was first done by James Mill. And that later on it was dressed up as ancient, medieval, and modern.
Okay. Wow.
and secularized.
Very influential.
And Professor Basham implicitly accept this sequence.
Yeah, this again very influential, dominant view of geography.
Yeah. Now, it could be argued that it may possess a grain of truth, but it is misleading if the impression one carries is that political power belongs solely to the Hindus ancient period, solely to the Muslims in the medieval period, and even solely to the British in the British period, because half of that period they were trying to conquer India till 1857.
Right.
And after that, all these princely states continued to exist.
Yeah.
More than 500 of them.
Right. Yeah.
So you could as well have a depiction of Indian historical reality in terms of shared power between Hindus and Buddhists and Jains in the Asian period, between Muslims and non-Muslims
The
in the medieval period, and British and the princely states in the
modern period.
modern period.
It cannot be one broad brush with one color, with one paint.
That should be enough for the day.
Okay, so we can continue more.
Because the next unit in his book is Glory of Ancient India. And that raises some very interesting points.
Okay.
So maybe we should discuss them in one unit.
Separate episode, Okay.
Not discussing them now, they will get fragmented.
Right. Okay, fine.
Discussion.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. And we'll continue.